and welcome to episode 1 of the Black Scientists Cooperative podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about COVID-19, the vaccine, and access to communities. We have our sister scientists here today, Dr. Charlitha Irving Joseph, Dr. Elethea Tillman, and Dr. Williams. I want to begin by re-emphasizing the mission of the Black Scientists Cooperative. We are in no way trying to give medical advice to our listeners and our viewers. Our goal and our mission really is to educate our community and help them to make informed decisions about their healthcare choices. So we're going to kick off tonight's discussion beginning by talking about COVID-19. And the first question that we're going to put out there tonight is, what's the difference between COVID-19 and the flu? Like, why should I care?
That's a good question. I think, just on the bare bone, okay, they both are viral infections. They both wreak havoc on the respiratory system. And they both can exhibit both mild and severe symptoms. So in that instance, I think that's where people are like, oh, it's just like the flu. But I mean, when we think about the flu, I think we need to look at it in terms of, with the flu, we've had exposure to the flu. Our immune system has, at some point or another throughout our life, we've had some sort of exposure to the flu, which means that our bodies are, and our immune system is somewhat equipped to fight the flu. Secondly, there's a vaccine available for the flu. Each year, a great number of people, they receive their vaccination, their flu shot on a yearly basis. And then if we look at the standard of care, for the flu, doctors have and healthcare providers have a baseline standard of care available when we are talking about, having flu symptoms or experiencing the flu. But when we look at COVID-19, our immune system, our immune system never was really exposed to COVID-19. So it has no clue of, how to attack it. Our immune system don't, and we didn't have a vaccine for it. Just now up until now, we have a vaccine, and we'll talk about that later in the episode. But, we didn't have a vaccine for it. And then if we look at in terms of our physicians and our frontline workers, they're still working out how to cope with the severe symptoms that COVID brings about in our patients. So I think there are differences between the two. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. I think if we think about it, I use the analogy, if we think about football, let's just use that as an example and look at that. I think this past week it was the SEC championship where University of Alabama played Ohio State. So if we take that and use it in terms of the difference between, COVID-19 and the flu, just take the football team. So you have the championship game where, if we use University of Alabama, if we use that as just say our immune system in our body, and we'll take Ohio State as, and for this case, it can be, they can be the flu. So both teams have prepared to play in the championship game. Their mindset is to go there and win. They've looked at the plays, they've practiced, they've looked at the videos, the coaches have prepared them to go into this game, and when they are expecting to go in and one person is coming out a winner. In this case, Alabama, of course, came out as the winner. And if we look at that as our bodies on the game day, Alabama took control and they won in the end because they were prepared to play against Ohio State. But then if we look at a different scenario, what if Alabama showed up at the championship game prepared to play, and they represent our body and our immune system, and when they got out to the field, the Chicago Bears NFL team showed up, They didn't prepare to play against the Chicago Bears. They prepared to play against Ohio State. So they have no idea how to, what's the mode of attack? How do we play against this team and how do we win? Of course, University of Alabama, they're winning all over the place. So I know they give it a good try. Like our bodies have given it a good try to try to fight COVID-19. But in the end, it's a professional football team that they've never played against. So I hope that kind of explains the difference and kind of put it in simpler terms. What's the difference between COVID-19 and the flu?
Shantae, I think that's an amazing analogy to explain, the fact that we don't have immunity to
Yep.
this particular virus. We've never seen it before. Our bodies have never seen it before. And to your point, we don't know how to fight it off. And that's why, you'll see different manifestations of symptoms depending on the person, whether the person is young or whether the person is old. We've seen mortality in each and every, different age group. And another point, like that question, why should you care? And a lot of questions that we'll be asking tonight, folks, have come directly from you. We put out a post saying, what would you like to hear about? And these questions have come mostly from the community. And we should care because the Black community is affected by COVID-19 disproportionately than that of our white counterparts. We die. We are 4 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than our white counterparts. We have a 40% increased chance to develop COVID-19 than our white counterparts. So again, here we go with the health disparities. It affects us differently. So we really need to care. Any thoughts, Charlitha or Alethea?
Well, I agree with everything that I said. That was an amazing analogy, Shantae. And I'd also add that something that you said that I wanted to expound upon is the standard of care for treating the flu. There are standard medications, Tamiflu. There are standard vaccines, like Shantae mentioned, and there is an established plan to treat someone who has the flu. We have no idea really how to treat COVID. All of the medications are experimental. Most of them are very expensive and probably not available to us, the average person. It's really those people who have financial means and access to the hospitals that have those particular type of drugs. And that again relates back to what Mila said about the health disparities, because when we look at access to healthcare, we all know that in rural and in Black communities, healthcare options are often very limited. So even getting to the hospital in some communities is still a battle because they don't have the tools to support your care. So why should we care? Because people are dying, we are dying, there's no standard of care. We have no idea how you're going to respond to it or how I would respond to it. And we can't just fall back on what the media is telling us in the case that, oh, if we're this age or that age, because we have really no idea who is going to be severely impacted by this. So it's important that we protect ourselves, and in protecting ourselves, we protect each other.
So let me follow up with this question. There are a lot of folks that don't believe that coronavirus and COVID-19 are real. I hear a lot of people say, my friend had it and my friend came out fine. As a matter of fact, the other day I ordered some food and a delivery person was like, well, I'm just wearing this mask because the job makes me. I don't believe in coronavirus. What do you say to those people?
For me, I think it's important to kind of think about that we're all made up genetically different. And so how COVID-19 affects me may not necessarily affect, is how it will affect if Charlitha was to get it. It's different. So that's one point. And then I think when we think about who is the most vulnerable, here. I think if you think about who is the one that is high risk for this, for me, I think about, the moms. I think about, grandmothers. I think about granddads. I think about fathers. I think about those individuals who immune system is not as good as it used to be. So they will have a harder time fighting off this virus. So for me, is to do my part in trying to help them, and help not spread that. And personally, I have my son is immunocompromised, so he's one of the most vulnerable. So even when we're talking about it's just been a flu for him, who actually contracted the flu a couple years ago. That was a whole ordeal hospital stay for us. So I think, it's important to think about not just, it's not a big deal and I'm just doing this for me, but I'm here to protect those that I love and care about the most.
Yeah.
So that brings us to our next question. What do you say to those folks that don't understand the concept of asymptomatic? So they feel like if they don't have any symptoms and they feel 100% fine, they feel like they should be able to go around their families. They feel like they should be able to go to social gatherings. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to be asymptomatic and explain, why you still need to use caution when going around family members?
That's a good question, because to me, asymptomatic people are the silent assassins. And the reason I say that, because when you talk about asymptomatic means that you're infected but not showing any signs or symptoms. So you feeling just fine and and thinking that everything is okay, but you still can pass it to anyone who comes in contact with you. So for a person who is not showing any symptoms and still, not following the CDC guidelines, you're putting so many people at risk. So I think the asymptomatic people, those who are feeling just fine, those are the ones that, you know, for me, are the ones that really need to follow those guidelines.
I agree with you, Shantae. I agree with you 100%. And I'll say this to folks, if I could just be myself right now, unfiltered, it's the same characteristics as you see in so many other viruses. When you're walking down the street, can you look at a person and tell that they have HPV, which is also a virus? Can you look at a person and tell that they have hepatitis? Can you look at a person and tell that they have HIV? It's really the same concept with COVID-19. You cannot look at someone and tell if they're asymptomatic or if they're not asymptomatic. So you have to proactively be careful. You have to wear your mask. You have to wash your hands. If we were talking about STIs, which is a taboo conversation, you would tell people strap up, right? Get a condom, use protection. Your mask in this case, as it relates to COVID-19, that's your protection. Not only are you protecting yourself, but you're protecting your family and your loved ones.
Yeah, and when we're talking about wearing masks, we also need to make sure that we're wearing the right kind of mask and then wearing that mask correctly.
Yep.
Because wearing it on our chins is not going to get it, right?
Right.
So we need to make sure that when we wear a mask, that our nose and our mouths are covered. And so just covering your mouth is, again, better than our chin, but we really want our nose and our mouths covered, because that prevents what we call transmission. Transmission means, so we understand that the virus is contained within the air that we breathe out, right? So every time an infected person breathes out, whether they are symptomatic or asymptomatic, they are releasing COVID into the environment. So by putting that mask on, that reduces the amount of virus that is released into the environment. And then if other people have their mask on, then now you got 2 layers of protection from transmitting from one person to the other. And that really should be our ultimate goal, to reduce and prevent the passing and spreading of the virus. And one of the best ways to do that is just to wear a mask and wash our hands and social distance, like we've been hearing for almost a year now. So I just wanted to, reiterate that when we're talking about wearing masks, we're really talking about wearing masks properly.
Thank you, Lee. I think that was great for us to, just reinforce the etiquette and the natural steps you should take in order to protect yourself and to protect others. So now I'm going to segue us into our next topic, which is the vaccines. We know that this is a hot topic since the onset and rollout of the 2 major vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. And so the first question we're going to pose is, are all vaccines created equal? What's the difference between the 2 vaccines that are out right now?
So I'll take that one. So traditional vaccines are made by using a microbial protein or some sort of inactivated coding material for that virus. And they are produced in multiple purification steps to produce proteins to introduce into your body in order to produce an antigen to induce an immune response. The difference with this COVID-19 vaccine is that it's made of mRNA. And with that mRNA, it's much easier to produce, and it will still produce those antigens that initiate that immune response in a much faster fashion. And so another reason that there are some significant differences, and you'll hear people say, well, it has to be stored a certain way, it has to be shipped a certain way. And that is absolutely true. Because mRNA is more fragile, it has to be kept at extreme temperatures in order to keep it what we call intact or together, so it doesn't disintegrate on its way to you, so that it keeps its effectiveness. Whereas in a traditional vaccine, it's encapsulated and it codes for these particular proteins or a segment of a coding section of the actual virus, or a piece of deadened virus sometimes, to initiate that response. And those means of vaccination, have a longer route in order to induce those immune responses. So it is different. mRNA is, one of the building blocks of, building the proteins in our bodies, and it's that of those of the virus as well, which is why we're able to utilize this technology. It's not new. The technology itself isn't new, but the way in that which we're producing the vaccines and administering the vaccines is new.
Okay, thank you. That's a great explanation, Saralitha. So the technology itself is not new. So what you're saying is the approach to leveraging the technologies to make vaccines is what is new, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with that said, a lot of folks are asking, is this safe? And how do we know that the vaccines are safe? Because even though it is an established technology that's been out there for a while, it's a new approach to making vaccines versus the traditional approach that's been taken. How do, folks at home, especially Black folks who, have the tendency to have trust issues around medical research and science because of, examples like the Tuskegee experiment, that just, ended in the 70s. So that's not that far away. What would you say to folks that, have major concerns around the safety of this vaccine?
I would say personally, your concerns are 100% valid. As a scientist, I had to, have a sit down talk with myself and look at the data out there on these vaccines and these vaccinations for COVID-19. So what you guys don't know is that my great grandfather was a participant, if that's what we want to call them, in the Tuskegee experiment. And so I have some personal bias, if you would, against experimentation on unknown or things that we feel like have come to market too soon, too fast, and we're not sure what the downstream effects are. So I had to look at the data, use my scientific, rational, reasonable mind to objectively look at what was out there, what was being done, and what in the end was the greater good and what would the end result. So if we take it at that, which I did, and look at, vaccines for smallpox, chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella, it was all experimental at one point. There were no guarantees, just like there are no guarantees with the COVID-19 vaccine. But when I looked at, did the risk outweigh the benefit, and how that downstream would affect, my health, the health of my family, my friends, my community, the people I work with, I felt that at that point, it was prudent for me. And when that's a personal choice for everyone, like, Milo said in the beginning, we're not giving out any advice for anybody. And it's a 100% personal choice for everyone. But my personal choice was that for the greater good and for the health and well-being of myself and, people I come into contact with, the benefit for me outweighed the risk, given, what I was able to uncover.
And so, with that, explanation, have you taken the vaccine, or are you considering taking the vaccine?
I have had one dose of the vaccine. I am due for my second dose in a week and a half. And, I will say, I had, very minimal side effects, if you will, very similar to that when I get my flu shot. A little achiness in my, in the injection site, a little chills, like an hour after. But then I had the Pfizer version of the vaccine, and I'll disclose this freely for everyone. So HIPAA. And so for me personally, knowing that it was, frozen at sub-zero temperatures, and being injected, reconstituted and injected, I had to think about, what that meant for me as a reactionary response. And, I didn't feel like I was having any sort of side effects or responses to the vaccine that I didn't expect.
Okay. I personally have not taken the vaccine. I'm still on the fence, still, trying to decide what I'm going to do. Alethea or Shantae, have you all taken the vaccine, or do you plan on taking the vaccine, or what are your thoughts?
So, like you, I have not yet taken the vaccine. I'm a little bit on the fence too. So I haven't really made a decision. I was actually talking to my mom, who is a healthcare professional, the other day, but she's an older woman, of course, and trying to help her decide what she might do or what she should do, and really just have this same conversation that we're having right now is pretty much the same conversation that I was having with her. So people, even and as like Charlita says, she's in healthcare. So even our healthcare workers have, a little bit of a sense of anxiety. So I think, like we said before, we recognize that what you're feeling is real because we feel it too. And that's a lot of the reason why we're here, because your feelings are valid, your anxieties are valid. We all feel it, right? So, like Mila, I have not yet made a decision as to whether or not I will take it, but I'm also working from home. So that also kind of plays into that as well.
So for me, I have gotten the vaccine. I got the Moderna. I had my first dose, and I'll have my second dose, I think 1st of February. And, um, you know, in the beginning, I was a little skeptical, or wasn't decided on what I was going to do. I think my first initial response was, uh, let me just wait to see what how this turns out before I I take the plunge. But you know, I'm not working from home, and so going in and out of the house, whole again with my family, it just for me was a safer option for me.
Okay. So this brings us to our last question for the podcast today. And that is, what is the role of the government in the vaccine process? And are they experimenting on us? And I think, Charlotte, that you touched on this a little bit, but if you can kind of give us some additional insights into how you think the government was involved in the process, and you know, again, are they experimenting on us, our Black folks, to target?
So I'll answer that in two parts, and I'll answer the last part first. I don't feel like Black people are a target per se. I feel like because a lot of competitive research is funded by the government, whether that's a research grant, whether that is support to institutions. So whether we realize it or not, many of the things that we have today, medications, treatments, interventions, are government funded in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And I will say that, with this particular vaccine, they did partner with quite a few industry companies and research laboratories to fund the expedition of development of a vaccine. Now, I am not a government employee. I don't have any idea of what happens in the back room after it's funded and after it's been distributed or approved and all of that. But I will say that on the front end, a lot of us, even on our podcast, us four have been funded at some point with government funding to fund our research. And people don't realize that a lot of the things that we have are government funded. Are they looking at us to, give them data, for that money? Absolutely. Do they want to see results? Absolutely. And so I think that, because of the prevalence and how widespread and how quickly and how severe the COVID-19 disease manifests itself in our populations, not only in the US, but worldwide, it gave an extra push to push people, to do more and to do it faster.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things I like to add, Charlitha, and, this is me coming from having perspective and being in science for 20 years, like all of us have, but then also working in biotech for 13 plus years. I want to dispel the myth that, medicine is 100% accurate and 100% finite, because that's not the case. With any medicine you take, with any drug you take, even with any medical device you have in your body, that's all approved through an FDA process that weighs the pros against the cons. That's why there's a such thing as side effects, right? Side effects. Side effects are the cons, but the pro is that you get to keep living. And so, these drug companies have been making vaccines for a very, 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 very long time. And so nothing, to Charlitha's point, will ever be perfect. Nothing will ever be 100%. Again, you have to make that choice. You have to weigh the pros and the cons and then make a personal decision for yourself.
That's good. That's real good.
All right. Any other comments, ladies?
No.
All right.
No,
Well,
I
we'd
think
like
this
to
is a good
thank
one.
everyone for coming out to our first episode of the Black Scientist Podcast. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. We hope that we were able to answer some of your questions. If you have additional questions, please post in the comments anything you want to know. We are here to be a resource to you. We are here to be a resource to our community. Again, our goal is not to offer any medical advice. You know, we're not physicians, we're scientists. We're here to educate and provide information and to make data simple. Thank you guys and have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.